This is Eat, Sleep, Box and Repeat, and I'm delighted to be joined by my esteemed colleague, Elliott for another weekly preview. This week we're going to be looking at a few different fights, from the UK, from America. Looking forward to this one. Elliott, how are you? You looking forward to this?
I am actually, Paul. Yeah, I know we weren't here last week, were we? Due to one of those weeks in boxing that you seem to get every so often, where there's just nothing essentially that you can preview of any note. But this is a busy week this week, thankfully, and I'm looking forward to talking through it with you.
Yeah, absolutely. I echo those comments. So, as usual, we're going to go through. We've got a main event fight. We'll go for an undercard fight from that card, an under the radar fight. That would normally be us wrapping it up with those three fights, but we've got a wee added bonus, a wee special for you at the end this weekend. So yeah, we'll start with our main event, and it's going to be the show from London with Katie Taylor headlining the event. Katie Taylor's fighting a lady called Karen Elizabeth Carbajal. I think I pronounced her name. Just give you a quick rundown of the two fighters. Obviously, everyone knows who Katie Taylor is. 21-0, 6 stoppages. She's 36 years old now. And her opponent is 19-0. So an undefeated opponent on paper. She's had just the 2 stoppages. She's 4 years younger than Katie Taylor. She's from Argentina. So, you look at this fight on paper and think, after beating Serrano and stuff, it's a name with an undefeated record. But then you look a little bit, you go into her record a little bit deeper, and you realize that Carbajal's, with the utmost respect, her padded record. She's never fought out of Argentina. She hasn't fought that many fighters with winning records, or if they do have winning records, it was 7 wins, 4 losses and things like that. So I personally don't expect much from her. I know we hear a lot about in recent weeks about Clarissa Shields claiming she's the GOAT, but I think without ever saying it, because she's so humble and stuff, you think, Katie Taylor she could argue that she is the greatest woman of all time too. So yeah, any fight Katie Taylor's in now, it is exciting. It's especially after that fight last year with Serrano, fight of the year, earlier this year it was, wasn't it? Fight of the year contender, 100%. It was sensational. So yeah, who knows, we might see that down the line next year again. But for now, we've got Katie Taylor against Carbajal this weekend. Headlining is at Wembley Arena. So yeah, Elliott, your thoughts on the fight?
Thanks, Paul. Thank you for your detailed breakdown there. I agree with what you're saying. I think I was looking at this bit of research before we came on here, and it's tough, isn't it? Because you look at like Carbajal and go, I don't know much about her. She's fought in Argentina, coming in with one of those padded records. You could essentially say 19-0, but then also, it's just, I suppose, it's the completely unknown. I mean, I'd expect Katie Taylor to win this. Obviously, I'm looking at looking like you were saying there about Carbajal having 2 KOs on that record. So essentially, in order to win, she's going to have to outbox Katie Taylor in England. And you just think the chances of that happening are slim to none, bordering on none. Then I think with Katie Taylor, like you were saying, it's like, another one of our esteemed colleagues who will remain nameless had the Taylor Serrano fight as fight of the year so far this year. Great fight as well. And yeah, just like you said, every single time she fights, it's a massive event. And you go through the names she has beaten, so Serrano there, but even victories against sort of Jonas, Delphine Persoon as well. You look at those kind of names, obviously Carbajal hasn't got those on her record. So frankly, I'm looking at it going, really, this should be a Taylor victory. And then again, Taylor with 6 KOs in 21. I'll probably lean towards, if I was a betting man, probably a Taylor points win. But equally, you don't know, because obviously the ambiguity around where the Argentinians, quality of the Argentinians' opponents, couldn't possibly say. But I think Taylor victory. But I'm looking forward to it just because, like you said, whenever Katie Taylor fights, it's a massive event. And again, as you also did say, and which also I agree with, there's that I suppose a discussion really to be had around Taylor versus Shields as essentially the number one women boxer at the moment, female boxer at the moment.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think that's interesting what you said there about Carbajal. Yeah, only 2. She's just got over a 10% knockout percent rate there. So is she gonna stop Katie Taylor? No. Is she? So you're gonna say she has to outbox her? Not a chance, really. Let's be honest. The interesting thing for me is they said there. Yeah, I think as we see a lot with the 10 2-minute rounds. A lot of women's fights do go the distance. I would be interested to see, depending on how this Argentinian girl takes a shot, she might not want to be there. Taking some big shots from Katie Taylor, so you never know. I don't know. If I did a wee bit more research, I'd be maybe tempted into stoppage. But yeah, who knows? That's obviously the main event of the card with Katie Taylor topping the bill. But there is, Elliot Greg, I believe, a very decent undercard fight that you want to talk a little bit about.
Yeah, it's quite an intriguing undercard fight, this, Paul, actually, and I'm going to talk you through it. Yeah, so what we're going with here is Jordan Gill versus Kiko Martinez. Now, it's one of those ones where if you look on paper, you look at Jordan Gill's record, 27-1-1, with one loss against Mario Tinoco. Was retired, essentially, retirement in that fight. You look at that record and essentially you go, that's very, very handy, looks good, should be sort of competing around sort of world level. Unpick it slightly, and it does look fairly sparse, I think it's a fair thing to say. So there's victories against, the last time out he fought Karen Guerfi, who people will probably know as coming back to fight Conlan, which I'd expect to be a very convincing Conlan victory. He also got stopped by Lee McGregor in one round. So you're looking at that going, okay, you can't read too much necessarily into that KO victory from Gill. Gill took 9 rounds to stop him. Other than that, there's victories against Reece Bellotti. Not a bad victory, to be fair, against Dominguez. Just looking through the record there, Jason Cunningham's other fairly good UD victory. But yeah, for a guy obviously who's sitting there with 27-1-1, the record is fairly sparse, which is why this is actually quite a good fight, because he's 28 years old, and you've got someone like Kiko Martinez who he's fighting against, who's 36, and who we know recently he obviously lost against Warrington, KO'd in the 7th round. We had that incredible victory against Kid Galahad, which people enjoyed, myself included, getting essentially outboxed, but then just finding that punch that just stopped everything in round 6. Well, it was round 5, but he had him hurt in round 5, and he came out and stopped him in round 6. But then he's obviously been against against fine opponents. Obviously lost the UD loss against Zelfa Barrett there. No shame in that. Got stopped by Gary Russell, 5th round. So he's kind of the guys he's tend to have lost obviously previously to Warrington and Santa Cruz and Frampton. So the guys he's lost against have been obviously world level opponents. So you could say, I suppose, Zelfa Barrett is sort of approaching that kind of summit, whereas the other guys I was mentioning there, like Frampton, obviously Santa Cruz, are obviously world champions, Warrington world champion as well. So he's lost against very good opposition, but obviously he's older than Gill. Obviously should be expecting him to be on the slide. So really, this actually fight does intrigue me, because I think someone in Jordan Gill's position needs this kind of what will be actually a very good sort of step out victory for him. But equally, there is danger in fighting someone like Martinez. So just I said, well, Gill, it's worth mentioning, Gill's only got 8 KOs in his 27 victories. So obviously, someone like Martinez, who will push on the front foot and does carry power, could he get him down the stretch? So Paul, I'm going to ask you. Actually, I'm going to come to you here and ask you how you see this fight going. I was going to maybe offer my opinion on how I see it going, but I'm not entirely sure that's formed yet. But I would say to you, how do you see it going? Do you see it essentially as being, as I'm kind of seeing it here, like a key or quite a good matchup, actually, like well matched, something that could have Jordan Gill stepping out as a sort of, I'll say marquee victory for him, it would be. But yeah, how do you see the fight going first and foremost? Please give us that breakdown, please, Paul.
Yeah, thanks, Elliot. I actually think this is a really good fight, and a really even fight, to be perfectly honest with you. And the reason I'm saying that is, you mentioned that long list of names that Kiko Martinez has lost to. He's lost nearly 10 fights, I think, or maybe even more than that in total. But as you said, they've all been, top level guys. Really, that Zelfa Barrett one, you say Zelfa Barrett's now obviously fighting for that vacant world title due to Joe Cordina's hand injury. And, it was kind of contentious decision that. A lot of people thought Kiko Martinez did enough to beat Zelfa Barrett. And then, yeah, you look at Jordan Gill, and, he has a couple of decent wins. Doesn't seem to be a puncher, bar his last fight against Guerfi. But then if you look at that fight, he was losing that fight, Jordan Gill. People were saying that Dave Colwell should have pulled him out, a round or two before, because he was taking a bit of a battering. So you're thinking, is Jordan Gill world level? This really does interest me, this fight.
It's hard, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is difficult. The more I think about it, the more I really do see this as a 50-50. Part of me is edging it towards Kiko Martinez, to be honest with you. I don't know whether that's just going off the Galahad's knockout. So he clearly still has a punch, Martinez. But then I look at the Zelfa Barrett one, and he was outboxing Zelfa Barrett for large portions of that fight. So this, yeah, I'm actually really excited about this fight now. now that we've talked about it, because yeah, I think it would definitely be Jordan Gill's biggest win, and if he does win in style, it is a bit of a statement. But again, you're fighting a man here who was world champion, less than 12 months ago, with that knockout against Kid Galahad. So I suppose you don't know how much that Warrington knockout's taken out of him. Might have taken more out of him than we think. But I think if the best Kiko Martinez shows up, and Jordan Gill's not 100% on it, we could be in for a bit of a shock here. I could see Martinez maybe pulling something off. It wouldn't surprise me one bit.
You know what? Now you've talked it through, and I was listening to you, and I was kind of formulating my own opinion. I actually agree with you. I think I'm leaning slightly towards Martinez, just because it is that thing. Like with someone like Warrington, obviously, he's going to push the pace. He's going to sort of throw a lot of punches, essentially. And therefore, for guys like 36, you think, okay, maybe that could kind of fatigue him down the stretch. But I just don't see Gill being able to put the same sort of pressure on. Even though Martinez is top 10 ranking, still ring ranking in that division. Gill was something 6th in the IBF or something. So it would be no surprise actually to me if Martinez did either manage to outbox him or actually stop him. Now, I know Gill's obviously only been stopped once, but you're sitting there going with the guys that Martinez has stopped. Obviously, like the Kid Galahad one being special. I'm just looking. I can't really get that out of my head. I just think I could quite easily see him setting up Gill for something similar. So I'm actually leaning slightly towards Martinez. Don't know whether it'll be a stoppage or points, but I would. Well, I suppose then you've got to bring into the fact it's in England. What if Gill gets a decision? So I don't know. It's just going to be a nightmare way to sort of go around it. But I think I'm on an edge towards Martinez. That's as far as I'm going to say. I'm not going to say how I think it's going to happen. But I'm just going to edge slightly towards Martinez, but we'll see, I suppose, next week whether we're right or we're wrong.
Yeah, I do agree with you. I mean, I hope I am wrong. I like Jordan Gill. I hope he does put in a career best performance, because then could be another potential world title challenger from the UK. So yeah, I do hope he wins, but do feel like he's up against it here if the best Kiko Martinez comes and he hasn't aged overnight.
No, I totally agree. Totally
I believe, Elliott, are you going to take us through the under the radar fight this weekend? So we've gone through the main event and the undercard fight from the UK card. I'm going to look into one a wee bit of an added extra, the added bonus at the end. But yeah, what have you got for us for our under the radar fight? One that potentially people has flown under the radar and people might have missed.
Yes, I think these sort of fights tend to flow under the radar mostly because they're stateside, and I feel like there's some good fights happening over in the US that we unfortunately don't tend to see as often in the UK, because either we're sleeping or it's behind paywall or various other sort of hindrances. But what I'm going to go here is over to Madison Square Garden, Paul. And I'm going to talk us through a guy who essentially needs no real introduction, but I'm going to give him an introduction anyway, and that is Vasily Lomachenko, who's fighting on Saturday night in the US time against Jermaine Ortiz. Now, what really do you have to say about Lomachenko? A guy with a 16-2 pro record, but essentially a guy who has been fast-tracked through that, obviously the pro ranks, due to his ridiculous amateur record, which is 396-1. And he had an unlucky, he was kind of his second pro fight, obviously lost to Salido. Split decision, a close fight there. Other than that, it's beaten everyone he's fought, apart from the performance against Teofimo Lopez, which was a strange performance, I think, from Lomachenko. I think people were sort of shocked at that. He tended to start very slowly, lost a lot of momentum, started way too late, really, and lost a close points decision there. But if you look at some of the other guys on his record, obviously recently had Richard Comey beat him, Luke Campbell, Crolla, Pedraza, Linares, Rigondo, Walters, who was dangerous at that time as well. So you're looking at guys who really, in that sort of around that sort of lightweight division that he's going in. He's going in super featherweight division as well, and going through and just kind of outclassing really. So this is a guy up against an opponent who really, I'm not saying it's harsh to say doesn't necessarily belong against Lomachenko when you think of some of the other names we could have in that lightweight division they're talking about should he come through this. But Jermaine Ortiz, I suppose, is relatively unknown, possibly to many people, but only really through the two fights that he's had. One against Joseph Adorno, which was a majority decision draw, and his last time out where he actually outpointed Jamal Herring, which I think was quite surprising for a lot of people. Obviously, Herring being a former world champion, but I think we can also say, without without appearing too harsh or being too contentious, that his best days are behind him. But still, a good victory for Ortiz. It's now lined him up with this fight against Lomachenko. Last thing I will say, Paul, just before I pass over to you for a prediction and any further analysis, is obviously it's been talked about that Lomachenko, should he get through this fight, which I think I'm going to go on record now and suggest I think he will, could be lining up a unification, a title fight against, not a unification fight, a title fight against Devin Haney, who obviously recently beat Kambosos for a second time down in Australia. So what I'm going to ask you first and foremost is, how do you see this fight going on Saturday night? And were that super fight to be made, Lomachenko gets another opportunity to become lightweight champion, how you see that fight going against Devin Haney?
Yeah, thanks, Elliott. That was a brilliant breakdown and analysis there. So with this weekend, it's safe to say, I didn't really know much about Ortiz, but bar the Herring victory. And don't get me wrong, yeah, Herring was on the slide, and he might have even retired now. Herring, has he? But that's still a good win. It's a name on your record, and that's probably why he's got this opportunity against Lomachenko. Although there's no belts or anything on the line, he'll be getting paid well to fight Lomachenko, I imagine. And just imagine, he'll be thinking, if I beat Lomachenko, all of a sudden I'm fighting Devin Haney for all the belts. Do you know what I mean? So there is, absolutely. Ortiz will be. I'm sure he'll come and give a career best performance. But in saying that, I don't think two Ortizes would give Lomachenko any real issues. And that's no slight on Jermaine Ortiz. I just think that Vasily Lomachenko, he's just the Matrix, really, isn't he? He's from another planet. He's unbelievable. Obviously that Teofimo Lopez loss, he wasn't great, but a lot of people still think he nicked the last few rounds, could have won the fight. It was very close. Then he's had his operation since. Come back, fought Richard Comey, and we saw during the fight he was shouting to Comey's corner to stop the fight. Like, it was just unbelievable, the beating that he was putting on Richard Comey, who's regarded as still one of the top 5, really. I know he's moved up now, but was one of the top 5 in the lightweight division. So how do I see this fight going? I could see Lomachenko getting a stoppage here, just with the sheer volume of punches and like the accuracy, just landing kind of at will, and not making him quit. But I could see the corner of Ortiz maybe throwing the towel in or pulling him out in between rounds. It wouldn't surprise me depending on how the fight's going. And I think Lomachenko will want to put in a statement victory. To say to the likes of Devin Haney, yeah, I'm still the guy. Yeah, you got all the belts, but until you beat me, you're not the guy. And how do I think that would go if they did fight Haney and Lomachenko? Although it's been talked about quite a lot, I have never actually thought about that fight, in terms of giving a prediction. But quickly thinking about it now, I don't know. I think Haney looked a bit tight at lightweight against Kambosos in the rematch. Okay, he went on and won every round, like he almost did, like he did in the first Kambosos fight, and he looked sensational. And fair play to him. He's been brilliant. He's done nothing wrong really in his professional career. But part of me just still thinks Lomachenko could beat him. I just think Lomachenko could maybe beat him on points. I don't think he could stop Devin Haney. Haney's a good bit bigger. But even Lomachenko shouldn't really be fighting at lightweight, should he? He's just doing that to achieve greatness, really, because he's mopped up all the other divisions. If you were pushing me for a prediction, I'd go Lomachenko on points against Devin Haney. But yeah, I just hope that fight happens, and I think there is a good chance of it happening. March, April next year.
Yeah, and I think I'm going to probably disappoint our regular viewers here by saying I agree with Paul actually on all points raised there. I'd actually still think the better Lomachenko, or the best Lomachenko, beat the best Haney, even at this stage of their careers. And I feel like since he's come back from that surgery, obviously there's a lot of complaints prior to that surgery about shoulder problems, various things in training camps, etc. But he seems like when he come back into Richard Comey, he was a very hard and durable opponent, former world champion, and put on that clinic is quite concerning for those that can be facing him coming down the stretch, including Ortiz, who I do think, and I agree with Paul again, I think a spiteful Lomachenko stoppage will probably come in here somewhere. If I had to say, I'd probably say somewhere around 6-7, maybe something like that. But yeah, so that's where I've taken us for the under the radar fight. But Paul, we have a gem, we have a treat, which you're going to take us through, and I'm going to pass back to you now to treat our viewers to that, please.
Yeah, our added bonus this weekend. Yeah, but I have a feeling in about 10 seconds time when I say what it is, people might be turning the video off. But alternatively, I think it's one of those things now where, yeah, as much as some people might not want to talk about it, you can't really ignore. And that, you can't ignore Jake Paul. That's what we're talking about, really. He's fighting Anderson Silva this weekend. Obviously, Anderson Silva, to the boxing viewers, you might have just heard his name really from his time over in the UFC. He's probably regarded as one of the best. You know, I'm a big UFC man myself, and in history, he's up there, top 5 UFC fighters of all time. He was UFC middleweight champion, and he had so many title defenses. He was brilliant over in MMA, and obviously he's fighting Jake Paul. So I'll just quickly give you a quick rundown, and then before I throw it back to you, Elliot, for your opinions on the fight. So yeah, Jake Paul, obviously everyone really knows him. No, it doesn't really need an introduction, but he's 5-0 in the professional ring with 4 stoppages. Just 25 years old still. He's 6'1", 76-inch reach. Fights out of the orthodox stance. Obviously Anderson Silva as well. He also fights out of the orthodox stance. He's got a 2-inch longer reach at 78 inches, and he's an inch taller at 6'2" as well. Silva's record's 3-1. He's 2 of his 3 wins have come by stoppage, which was his second and fourth fight. So yeah, his last fight he won by stoppage, and his one defeat he retired in 1 round. But I don't really know what happened in that. I think it was a bit of a strange fight. So yeah, the Brazilian, the Spider, I'm gonna talk a bit about what he's done so far in his career. But the thing you can't get away from here is the fact that Jake Paul's 22 years younger, I believe, than Anderson Silva. I believe Anderson Silva is now 47. So yeah, the 22 years. You know, Anderson Silva could really be Jake Paul's dad. And I mean that in the nicest way possible. But yeah, looking at what they've done in the ring so far, Silva's obviously he got beaten his pro debut, but since then he's won his 3 fights. And as much as you would say Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. has become a bit of a joke at the end of his career. He was a former world champion. I think might have been a WBC world champion. And Anderson Silva beat him over 8 rounds. So quite incredible. So yeah, he has a win over a legitimate boxer who was a legitimate world champion, who had actually been in the ring with Canelo Alvarez and Miguel Cotto and people like that. So yeah, ridiculous. So that was an impressive win for Anderson Silva, and he has looked good. And I think it's safe to say that this will be his toughest test for Jake Paul. But then again, you look at Paul, and he's kind of impressed and improved every fight. Hasn't fought in 10 months since that big 1-punch KO of Tyron Woodley in their rematch. 4th fight in a row against a UFC fighter. I know a lot of people are calling for him to actually fight a real boxer. Obviously, the Tommy Fury fight's fallen off a couple of times. The Hasim Rahman Jr. fight fell off too. But yeah, despite Silva being that old, I think this is still going to be Paul's toughest boxing test to date. So yeah, Elliot, I'll ask you just your overall thoughts on Jake Paul as a man, as a boxer, first and foremost, whether this is his toughest fight, and if you could give a quick prediction too at the end, that would be great.
My thoughts on Jake Paul are positive, actually. I think a lot of people in boxing circles tend to look negatively or look down on Jake Paul. But I think, we were kind of saying on it off air, there's been so many issues with boxing recently that almost, for want of a better phrase, takes the piss out of itself enough without worrying about what Jake Paul's doing. I mean, if we look at like Fury, Chisora, what happened with Crawford last week, not fighting Spence, all these sort of things don't do boxing any favours. So Jake Paul, I kind of sit there and think, well, it's a guy who seems to be taking it seriously as well. He's not just coming in. I mean, I know he's fighting obviously guys that crossover guys essentially, but you also look at it and go, well, this is someone who's come to boxing late and is training and is also trying to sort of learn and evolve. So rather than sort of criticising the opponents he's chosen, I just sit there and thinking, well, a lot of guys on small hall shows, whatever, granted, they'd be fighting boxers. They'd be fighting boxers, journeymen with losing records anyway, and trying to learn their craft that way. So I almost feel like I'll give him a break really on that respect. I don't have anything against him for doing it and making money while he's doing it.
Recording in progress.
When I think of this fight that we've got coming up against Silva, I just think, to be honest, when you were describing it, when I initially looked at it, I thought the age is the massive factor here. Looking at over 8 rounds, thinking surely if Paul can just sort of get to sort of 3-4 rounds in, surely Silva will be knackered. You've seen it when we've seen those like guys like Tyson fighting in exhibitions, or the guys that are like ex-boxers. You sort of get to that stage where you think, all right, you're a lot slower. Obviously, when it gets in even those exhibition bouts, Roy Jones, they're potentially a bit older, but you look at it going, just get to like 3 or 4 rounds, and obviously you can sort of like stick it on him. But then I was looking at that Chavez victory, and that was only in 2021 as well. So you're sitting there going, he's gone 8 rounds in 2021 against, like you say, Chavez Jr., who, no matter what people think of him, like you said also, is a credible fighter who has been in with credible names. So I'm actually a bit concerned. I want Jake Paul to win this, frankly, because I almost want him to like go up against Tommy Fury or whatever, fight whoever is coming along. And I'm actually concerned that this might be a step too far. The only thing I'm kind of hoping in a way is that there might be some sort of financial encouragement for giving a decision towards Jake Paul if it does go 8 rounds. But part of me is genuinely concerned. Anderson Silva is no joke. This is frankly, I think, the toughest. I mean, you can say his age is a joke and the sort of the way he's sort of taking it here. But of all those guys that Jake Paul's fought, I agree with you fully. This is the hardest fight he's had. Prediction wise, I just can't get that Chavez victory out of my head. Prediction wise, I'm almost sitting here going like, I think Silva's going to win, but I just hope Paul gets a decision somehow. But I actually genuinely think Anderson Silva's going to win this if he wants to, if he's motivated to win this. I just can't see how you can beat Chavez, even in the sort of problems that Chavez has had over 8 rounds at 46, 47 he must have been, and not beat Jake Paul over a similar distance. I just don't see how that would work. So I'm actually leaning towards Silva. Disappointing as that will be to myself and to other Jake Paul fans around the world. That's how I see it going. Paul, I mean, yourself, how do you see it? How do you see it going? You gave us the eloquent breakdown. You know more also about the UFC than me. You know more about Anderson Silva than these guys. So how do you see it going? Do you share my opinion, or do you think that Jake Paul will somehow put in a performance here?
I kind of have the edge towards what you were saying as well, in the sense that that Chavez fight, although in the latter stages of his career, recently in the past few years since the Canelo defeat, he's just kind of, people have labelled Chavez Jr. a bit of a joker. So you don't know how seriously he took the fight with Anderson Silva. There's that. But at the same time, regardless, the fact that Anderson Silva, in his 3rd ever professional boxing fight, at 46 years old, he would have been this time last year then, obviously. Yeah. He beat a former world champion who was, he was a world champion a few years ago. Like, yeah, you can't get that out of your head. And over 8 rounds too. It wasn't like, he got a 1-punch knockout lucky win or whatever. Or if it was over, 3 or 4 rounds and he somehow won. It's 8 rounds. He's had to win at least 4. He's had to win 5 rounds there. Yeah. Against the former world champion. So yeah, fair play to him. I think Anderson Silva will win as well. I could see it being on points. I don't know if he could stop Jake Paul. I don't know why. I just can't see it being a stoppage. But I can't, like you said about, you can't ignore the Chavez. When I just can't ignore the age thing as well. Really,
it's so hard. It is hard.
I think if you had to push me for a prediction, I would pick Anderson Silva to win on points probably. But with no confidence at all. I, unlike you, don't want Jake Paul to win, so I will be in the spider corner for this fight. I think we had to talk about it. You can't really ignore it now. So yeah, hopefully we don't get a dodgy decision. Where a lot of people think that Jake Paul's already won this fight before a punch has been thrown. I hope it is a fair fight, and if he does win to him, fair play to him for that.
No, I totally agree, Paul. Thank you for your eloquent summary there as well, and hopefully we'll get a good weekend for all of these fights, won't we? Really?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, listen, guys, that's all we have time for today. You were with Eat, Sleep, Boxing, Repeat, myself and Elliott, breaking down the week ahead's boxing. So yeah, thanks for watching. I'm sure Greg will have some prediction videos. We've got a lot of other content out there. Interviews that coming out every week with several different fighters, and we'll have a betting preview for all of the fights that we've just outlined there as well. So yes, thanks for watching, and Elliott, all the best. I'll speak to you again soon.
Thank you, guys. Thanks all for watching.